Paul Teutul Sr. once said on television that he was going to fabricate a fender, redo the struts, and get the front fender finished, but what viewers did not know at the time was that his life story was far more complicated than any motorcycle build. In 2008, millions of people watched in shock as Paul fired his own son, Paul Jr., on live television. Over 4 million viewers saw that painful moment, but what they did not see was everything that led up to it. For many years, Paul stayed silent about the real reasons behind his anger, his control issues, and the deep family conflict. It was only much later, when he was 76 years old, after he had lost his mansion, filed for bankruptcy, and spent nearly 10 years without speaking to his son, that he finally told the truth. What he admitted shocked many people. The problem was never really about motorcycles or money. It was something deeply personal that started long before the cameras ever arrived. Paul Teutul Sr. was born on May 1, 1949, in Yonkers, New York. From the moment he entered the world, life was harsh. His childhood home was filled with constant yelling, violence, and alcohol. His mother drank heavily and often humiliated his father in front of others. His father worked long hours but came home angry and took his frustration out on Paul. Physical punishment was common. Paul could be sitting quietly at the kitchen table doing homework when, without warning, his father would slap him so hard that his lip would bleed. If Paul dared to ask why, his father would coldly respond, "That one's for next time." Fear ruled the house. There was no sense of safety, no affection, and no warmth. It was not just a poor home like many others in Yonkers at the time. It was a dangerous and emotionally damaging place. By the age of 5, Paul had already seen more pain than many adults experience in a lifetime. His mother's drinking made her unpredictable and emotionally distant. She was not loving or supportive, and she showed very little care toward Paul. There were no hugs or comforting words, only loud arguments, insults, and tension. Later in life, Paul Jr. would say that the way his grandmother treated Paul Sr. deeply damaged him. Paul grew up learning that love came with pain and that closeness meant getting hurt. He never learned what a healthy family looked like, and that confusion stayed with him for decades. As Paul got older, the emotional pain inside him began looking for an escape. By the age of 10, he spent as little time at home as possible. He wandered around collecting scrap metal and spent hours outside just to avoid being inside the house. He started building things, welding pieces of metal together and imagining that each piece belonged to a better life. Working with tools gave him peace. The garage became his safe place, a quiet escape from the chaos inside his home. That was where his love for machines began, and in many ways, it saved him. But that escape came with consequences. At just 12 years old, Paul broke into a neighbor's garage and stole a box of tools. With those tools, he built a rough motorcycle. He did not do it to show off or make money. He did it because riding that bike made him feel free. It gave him a sense of control and power that he never felt at home. That moment also set a pattern for his life. When rules stood in his way, he broke them. Authority figures meant little to him because adults had already failed him. School offered no relief. Paul struggled to focus and felt disconnected from teachers. To him, they were just more adults telling him what to do without understanding him. By the age of 16, he dropped out of high school without a diploma and without regret. He walked away with nothing but his skills, his anger, and a strong desire to build something that belonged only to him. Around the same time, alcohol entered his life and quickly took control. By 15, he was drinking every day, starting with stolen beer and quickly moving on to hard liquor. At 16, drinking an entire six-pack alone was normal. By 17, he was blacking out regularly, waking up in unfamiliar places with no memory of how he got there. His mood swings became intense, and his anger grew worse when he drank. Everyone around him could see that he was spiraling out of control. In 1966, hoping to escape his problems, Paul joined the Merchant Marines. He believed that life at sea might discipline him and give him direction. Instead, it made things worse. Heavy drinking was common among the sailors, and Paul fit right in. On one voyage, he drank an entire bottle of whiskey along with several beers and blacked out so badly that he woke up in the ship's medical bay after nearly falling overboard. He continued showing up drunk, getting into fights, and disappearing in foreign ports. For 3 years, his drinking only intensified, and no one stopped him. When Paul returned home in 1969, he married a woman named Paula, and soon after, they had a son, Paul Jr. Instead of calming down, Paul's behavior became more destructive. He drank half a gallon of wine every day along with hard liquor. His home life became just as violent as the one he grew up in. Between 1970 and 1972, police were called to their house more than 15 times. Neighbors often heard shouting and crashing sounds. Paula frequently had bruises, and Paul's rage would explode without warning. Once, he threw a television through a window. Another time, he smashed every dish in the kitchen. He would disappear for days on drinking binges, leaving Paula alone with their baby and no support. In 1972, Paul's drinking nearly killed him. After consuming a bottle of brandy and several beers, he crashed his pickup truck into a tree at high speed. He suffered broken ribs, a shattered collarbone, internal injuries, and a punctured lung. His blood alcohol level was 3 times the legal limit. Doctors warned him that another accident like that would be fatal. Yet just 2 days after leaving the hospital, still wrapped in a body cast, Paul started drinking again. He lost his driver's license but continued driving anyway. He simply could not stop. Between 1973 and 1975, Paul lost job after job. He worked at a steel plant, a construction equipment company, and a car parts factory, but each time he was fired for being drunk, passing out at work, or fighting with supervisors. Eventually, no one wanted to hire him. He survived on odd jobs, welfare, food stamps, and sometimes even traded labor for bottles of alcohol. Despite everything falling apart, Paul started a small welding business in 1973 with nothing more than a truck and a welding machine. He called it Paul's Welding. He had only $500 in savings and continued drinking heavily while trying to run the business. Many mornings, he woke up unsure of where he was. Addiction ran deep in his family, and he felt trapped by it. Still, the business slowly grew. In 1981, Paul hired his 12-year-old son, Paul Jr., to help in the shop. The environment was dangerous, tempers were short, and Paul Sr. was still drinking heavily. Even so, Paul Jr. worked hard and learned quickly. By his teenage years, he was running parts of the shop. Their relationship was strained from the beginning. Paul Sr. was unpredictable and controlling, while Paul Jr. tried to bring order and stability. They were building something together, but it was built on years of pain and broken trust. In 1985, everything finally began to change. After a night of heavy drinking, Paul promised Paula that he would attend an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. He went, and then he kept going. For 9 years, he did not miss a single meeting. The cravings did not disappear overnight. It took 2 full years before they began to slow down. But gradually, his mind cleared, his anger softened, and his life started to rebuild. The business grew stronger, eventually earning over $100,000 a year. Even so, staying sober was difficult. Everyone around him still drank, especially at work. While others toasted with whiskey, Paul drank soda and reminded himself why he quit. By 1986, Paul moved into a larger 7,000 square foot shop and renamed the business Orange County Iron. He worked long hours and faced constant pressure, but he stayed sober. The temptation was always there, and the cost of expansion nearly destroyed the company, but he held on. By 1999, at the age of 50, Paul felt something was still missing. For decades, he had secretly built motorcycles in the basement of his shop, a passion he had buried for years. He sold his iron business and invested $50,000 of his savings into a new dream called Orange County Choppers. It was not just a business decision. It was a way to reclaim his life. That same year, he built his first custom bike, True Blue, and took it to Daytona. The bike was different, bold, and risky. Many criticized it, but it won, and within 2 days, he had orders worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. That moment changed everything and set the stage for both success and future heartbreak. Everything at Orange County Choppers was growing rapidly. Discovery Channel had initially planned to film a show at a shop in New Hampshire, but just 48 hours before shooting, they switched locations to OC. By Thursday, The crew was already filming the pilot for American Chopper. No one even officially informed the network beforehand, it just happened, and it worked perfectly. That quick decision launched a franchise that would eventually have 165 episodes and generate millions in revenue. However, fame brought its own pressures and challenges. In 2004, Paul Sr.'s temper became a problem when he lost control on set and fired a cameraman for moving equipment without permission. He screamed, kicked the man off the set, and production had to stop for a day, costing $15,000. The footage of his outburst was deemed too intense to air because it revealed his anger in a way no audience was ready to see. By 2005, the business was booming. OC was making over $10 million a year. Discovery Channel initially paid $25,000 per episode, but by season 3, that had risen to $100,000 per episode. Sponsorship deals were huge, with brands like Caterpillar, Miller High Life, and NASCAR paying anywhere from $500,000 to $2 million for exposure. Merchandise such as shirts, tools, cologne, and even video games added another $2.5 million annually. Paul Sr. purchased a luxurious two-bedroom estate worth $8.9 million on 38 acres, complete with alpacas and miniature horses. Despite the financial success, cracks were forming in the family business. In 2006, tensions exploded between Paul Sr. and Paul Jr. during the construction of a $200,000 military tribute bike. Paul Sr. smashed a $3,000 part on the floor, and Paul Jr. threw a chair and stormed off in anger. Over 4.2 million viewers watched the episode, making it the most watched in the show's history. Years later, the scene became a viral meme on social media, something Paul Sr. admitted he didn't even understand at the time. 2 years later, in 2008, the situation escalated further. On camera, Paul Sr. fired Paul Jr. in front of the entire crew, violating their contract with TLC. Paul Jr. packed up, cursed his father, and walked out. This led to lawsuits, with Paul Jr. suing for $10 million while TLC penalized both men. Their feud lasted a decade. Paul Sr. even missed his son's wedding in 2010, and they did not begin to repair their relationship until 2018. Despite the family drama, the OC brand continued to grow. One of the most unusual builds was a mower-themed motorcycle commissioned by Dixie Choppers in 2007. The bike had spinning blades and a 1,000 cubic centimeters lawn mower engine with 32 horsepower. It cost over $200,000 and toured internationally. Paul used real chrome-plated mower parts to create it, and it became one of the most talked-about projects in OC history. In April 2008, Paul Sr. opened a $13 million, 61,000 square foot headquarters, complete with glass walls, a restaurant, an arcade, and retail space. The facility could accommodate 75 workers and looked like a dream come true. Unfortunately, the timing was terrible because the financial crisis had just hit. By 2011, the company could no longer afford the building, defaulted, and had to give it up. In 2016, the property sold for just $2.3 million, representing an 82% loss. Behind the scenes, things were far worse. In 2018, Paul Sr. filed for bankruptcy. He had just over $1.8 million in assets but owed more than $1 million. His monthly income included $13,000 from OC, $5,500 from family, and $2,600 in Social Security. He listed only 3 dogs, a few old pistols, some inexpensive furniture, and a $25 computer as assets. Additionally, he was paying $13,445 per month to repay loans from his own retirement fund. Not every project was successful either. In 2010, Paul built a custom bike for Jay Leno inspired by a 1939 Brooks Superior. Years later, Leno described it as the worst bike he had ever owned, complaining that it broke down on the highway and had terrible brakes. Paul fired back, saying Leno was just jealous, but the damage to his reputation was done. That bike became a symbol of the difference between how things looked on TV and how they performed in real life. The firing of Paul Jr. in September 2008 was the most shocking moment in the series. It happened because Paul Jr. was late yet again. Paul Sr. lost his temper completely, screaming at him in front of everyone. Paul Jr. yelled back, claiming the shop would fall apart without him, then threw a chair and stormed out. Discovery executives were stunned. They had never expected a real family breakdown to happen on camera, yet it did, and it changed everything. In 2009, Paul Sr. sued his son to reclaim his 20% stake in OC, costing more than $500,000 in legal fees. Interestingly, Paul Sr.'s own appraiser valued the shares at zero. In 2010, a judge ruled in favor of Paul Sr., but later that year, a higher court reversed the decision, declaring that the contract was too vague. The legal battle drained both men financially and emotionally, providing no closure. Meanwhile, Mikey, another of Paul Sr.'s sons, shared his own painful experiences. In 2010, he revealed that Paul Sr. had missed his rehabilitation graduation just to finish a bike build. Mikey felt invisible, believing motorcycles mattered more than he did. It was especially painful because he knew his father had fought similar demons. That moment created further emotional distance between the three men. By 2011, Paul Sr.'s anger began affecting everyone around him. He threw tools and damaged thousands of dollars of filming equipment. Discovery Channel had to intervene, sending their president to the shop, making therapy mandatory, and hiring anger management coaches. Production had to pause while staff members worked through the tension, costing the network roughly $2 million. By 2010, viewership had dropped dramatically. Ratings fell from 3.2 million to just 800,000, signaling that the original show was losing its appeal. The combination of family conflict, financial strain, and personal struggles created a volatile environment that no amount of fame could fix, showing how even enormous success could be undermined by unresolved personal and familial issues. By the time Sr. vs. Jr. launched later that year, it gave the show a short-term boost, but audiences could see it wasn't just entertainment anymore. The cameras were capturing a real family breaking apart, and viewers weren't tuning in for drama, they were witnessing it. In 2012, Discovery Channel cancelled all of the shows related to OC. The final episode aired on December 17, drawing just 400,000 viewers. The golden era was over. Fame, money, and motorcycles couldn't fix what was broken. Paul Sr.'s financial troubles worsened in February 2018 when he filed for Chapter 13 bankruptcy, exposing all of his debts and financial missteps. He owed roughly $1.71 million to nearly 50 creditors. Even though he earned $16,531 per month, his debt payments alone were $2,229, leaving him $3,598 short every month. His debts were complicated and overwhelming. He owed $32,000 to Hudson Valley Merchandising, $51,841 to JTM Motorsports, $22,365 in restaurant taxes, nearly $70,000 in credit card debt, and another $1.88 million tied up in his Montgomery property's mortgage interest. Local taxes added $151,000 more. The bankruptcy trustee even questioned whether his numbers were accurate. By 2019, Paul was dealing with 8 different lawsuits while trying to prove he could pay $2,148 a month for 5 consecutive years. Behind the financial chaos was a deeper truth Paul had shared only in his 2009 memoir, his long battle with alcoholism. On January 7, 1985, at 35 years old, he had hit rock bottom. He was coughing up blood, blacking out, crashing cars, more than a dozen accidents, and he had even considered death as his only way out. But that day, he made a promise to his wife, Paula, that he would try to get sober. He walked into an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, committed to the process, and attended every session for 9 years without missing a single one. That decision changed his life, but it didn't protect him from making bad financial choices later. One of the biggest mistakes was the Orange County Choppers Roadhouse, announced in May 2010. The project promised a full experience: food, drinks, a microbrewery, gaming, retail, all under one roof. But it eventually turned into something much darker. Investigators described it as resembling a Ponzi scheme. More than a dozen investors contributed between $12 and $15 million, but Paul was allegedly offering shares in companies that didn't exist, pitching the same opportunities under different company names. These decisions were made during a period when he was still adjusting to life in recovery, struggling under emotional pressure and instability, and the legal consequences piled up. Then came 2020, and the pandemic shut down New York operations. Paul Sr. decided to relocate Orange County choppers to Florida, aiming for a fresh start. Unfortunately, it caused more disruption than renewal. Around 20 longtime employees were fired because they refused to uproot their families, and Paul labeled them disloyal. The new shop was only 11,000 square feet, a dramatic drop from the iconic 61,000 square foot facility. Hundreds of pieces from the original building were sold off. Former employees described Paul as acting more erratically than ever, creating a toxic work environment where people quit even before being fired. What was supposed to be a comeback ended up as a quiet farewell to the team that had built the brand. By May 2019, the last symbol of Paul Sr.'s empire, the Montgomery estate, was gone. Originally listed for $2.5 million, it sold for $1.5 million, a 40% loss. The estate had 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, a luxury kitchen, a koi pond, a pool with waterfalls, a stocked fishing pond, a 2-story garage with guest apartments, patios with Viking grills, and even a volleyball court. Once a symbol of success, it became a marker of collapse, a public testament to his financial and personal struggles. Meanwhile, his relationships with his sons continued to suffer. In January 2025, Paul marked 40 years of sobriety with a simple Instagram post. 40 years ago today, I said, I could not ever stop drinking. Never say never. It was raw and reflective, showing how close he had come to losing everything in 1985. That promise had saved his life, but it hadn't repaired his relationships. Paul Jr. confirmed that they had gone 10 years without speaking, and Paul admitted in interviews that missing his son's wedding in 2014 became the symbol of their fractured bond, caused by his alcoholism and need for control. Paul Sr. publicly admitted that he had put his personal demons ahead of his family. That rare moment of honesty revealed a side of him most viewers never saw. Behind the scenes, it was even worse. Discovery Channel reportedly hid footage from the early 2000s showing multiple relapses while Paul was filming American Chopper. The network chose not to air it, fearing it would end the show, leaving Paul to struggle privately while presenting a strong front to the world. In 2024, Paul and Paul Jr. attempted to reconcile with a reunion bike build. Paul Sr. admitted to his son that firing him years ago had been the biggest mistake of his life. Yet, old patterns emerged during the project. Paul Sr. dominated the design process, ignoring much of Paul Jr.'s input. The project finished, but the emotional healing didn't. It became clear that some relationships are harder to repair than machines, no matter how many hours you spend in a workshop. By 2025, at 76 years old, Paul Sr. was in therapy and finally opening up about his childhood. He shared photos with his mother and sisters, posting captions hinting at long-standing family wounds and reflecting on how his upbringing shaped his anger, his need for control, and his fear of criticism. Mental health experts noted that it was significant for someone of his age to publicly discuss therapy. Others questioned whether such late-in-life change could truly repair decades of damage, especially with Paul still seeking validation through social media for small steps in his progress. Financially, things never fully recovered. At his peak, Paul Sr. earned $100,000 per American Chopper episode across 165 episodes, but by 2025, his net worth had fallen to only $500,000. Even after filing for Chapter 13 bankruptcy in 2012, with $1.8 million in assets and $1.7 million in debt, he kept moving forward. Today, Paul works out of the OC Roadhouse and Museum, focusing on smaller custom bike projects. He remains active in veteran charities, raising $10,000 during the 2025 OCC Invitational for veterans. He lives with Joan Kay, who manages the business side, and together they care for rescue animals. Despite all the personal, financial, and family struggles, Paul Sr.'s impact on motorcycle culture remains undeniable. His custom choppers transformed the look of bikes across America, setting new standards for long frames and themed motorcycles. American Chopper aired in over 160 countries, and corporate clients continued to order his unique builds. The father-son drama captured on screen influenced reality TV storytelling for years to come. Paul Jr. now reflects that the fame came at too high a personal cost, but even he acknowledges that his father changed the game, leaving a lasting legacy in both motorcycling and television.